Welcome, number 19, I think, something like that. I can't remember. It will say under the video what number it is. I think it's number 19. Welcome back to Derech Hashem with Sight Or and Jewish Educating in Manchester. That's JEM. You can look it up, gemuk.org, and you can see lots of free shiurim there as well. And coming back to our Derech Hashem, Way of God extravaganza, going through the material with you. We've just finished a whole chapter. And we talked about the idea of the soul and the body and how they get separated and what happens when they get separated and when they come back together and the differences when they're in this world versus the next world, etc. And it's muted. All very good. Now what we're going to talk about is a brand new chapter, which is section 1, chapter 4, human responsibility in Sefer Derech Hashem. You can follow online with an online copy, or you could have an actual physical copy. That would be best. We're on page 61. If you have a translation with Rabbi Ari Kaplan's translation, published by Feldheim. And if not, you can just listen. I do suggest, though, as we are quite far in, that you may want to roll back a couple of episodes. If you've just clicked on this isn't going to make much sense. You're going to need to roll in and see where we're holding. But I'm very happy that you're joining us. And if there's any questions, there is an anonymous Google Doc form that you can see under the video. There's a link to that you can fill in questions, and we can try to answer questions as we go. All right, so let's do page 61.1, which is section 1, chapter 4.1. In this world, which is Olam Hazeh, this world. What's this world? A place with evil that we can choose between. That's key. Olam Haba has no evil in, because the evil will act as a barrier between God and us. God cannot give of his good to another if he's got a barrier between you and him. And the ultimate thing he wants to give you is him, because he's the ultimate thing he can give. There's nothing better than him. Everything else has got some kind of deleterious problem. He's the best thing to give. Therefore, the ultimate thing he could give is him. He can't give that to you while there's evil, which he's created to be a barrier between you and him so that you can choose. And you need to be able to choose so that you can feel good that you've made a choice. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a perfect giving. You'd feel as if you're getting charitable dollar rather than getting wages. That's all way back when, just doing a bit of revision for you there. In this world, which means it has evil in, man's condition depends upon two things. There is, on the one hand, his own makeup, the elements of his being and their structure. That's our bodies, physiology, anatomy. Secondly, there's his environment and all that is associated with it. So really there's the internal element and the external element. As discussed earlier, man consists of two opposites, a physical body and a spiritual soul. The physical body is drawn after its nature. The spiritual soul is drawn after its nature. That creates a tussle. And that tussle is a stress. And that stress is what we call bechira. You only get that bechira if it's a true tussle between body and soul. If it's body versus body or soul versus soul, it's not a bechira decision. It's obvious, however, that the physical is dominant in man and its influence is very strong. Whenever it says in man, of course, it means in humanity. It's not talking about women. We're talking about everything. Obviously, just that the book is written, say, in man, okay? When an individual is born, he's almost completely physical, with the mind having only a very small influence. As he matures, his mind continues to gain influence depending upon the individual's nature. A baby is essentially almost entirely Yetzer Hara. It's almost all body, no soul input. Even after an individual matures, however, the physical does not automatically relinquish its influence and stop inclining the individual towards its way. I would highlight or underline this next sentence. This is a key sentence in the entire book, let alone the chapter, let alone the section, but the work. The only means by which one can overcome the physical is by growing in wisdom, becoming versed in it, and living by it, most importantly. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 cross-references here. I don't want to say them out. It's page 43, page 67, page 73, page 253, page 267, page 335, page 355. This is constant through the whole work. This is called Derech. This is called Derech Hashem, a way or a road. A derech is like a road or a way, an avenue, a lane. You can't get through to God just mentally. You got to do it. You got to live it. It's all very well to give lip service and say X, Y, and Z. Unless you're doing it, you won't get there. You can sit and think and learn about exercise physiology for 6 months. You won't get any fitter. Get on a treadmill. Now, obviously, if you get on a treadmill and you know about like Z-line fracture and you know how much oxygen there is in your lungs and stuff like that, that's very good. But you've got to actually do it if you want to get fitter. So too, the path that the Torah is giving us isn't just a mental, intellectual, spiritual concept. It's a physical concept which actually has to be trod. That's why he said to Abraham, walk before me and be perfect. You cannot be perfect unless you actually walk the walk. It's not enough to talk the talk. You've got to get it done. Now, the only way you can do that is by becoming well-versed in wisdom, thinking about it, and practically putting it into action. There's no other way. It won't work any other way. Don't kid yourself, and don't listen to anyone else who tells you, yeah, it's fine. You've got to do it. By fortifying oneself, strengthening yourself, to follow his intellect, he can overcome the physical nature and keep the physical desires in him firmly bridled. You can do this. It's not impossible by any means. But we know that we don't get the full neshama associated with the body until the age of 13 for a boy or 12 for a girl, which is why we make such a big to-do about bar or bas mitzvah. Well done. You're now a body-soul matrix. Now you're going to have bechira. There's no real bechira before bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah. A kid that gets his call up for Shabbos, you know, it's bar mitzvah. Do you think his Yetzer Hara has been there 12 and 3, you know, almost 12.9 years, right? Suddenly the Yetzer Tov comes in, his neshama comes in and says, oh, wow, this is great. We're in shul. It's great. Well, next week we're going to the football. Why? No. This is great. No. I've been here almost 13 years. You can't just turn up on the scene and stop me from getting done what I want to get done. I've been living here in this body for 12 years. I am a body. It's not just going to immediately change over when you get your neshama. The neshama's the new kid on the block. The Yetzer Hara is the old kid on the block. The body's been there longer than the soul. The soul doesn't come in until later. And it's got to bed in. It takes 7 years to bed in to the body. We see material phenomena before our eyes. But in essence, at a deeper level, all that is material is inherently dark and coarse, existing at the opposite pole from those seeking to approach God and cling to his holiness. And this is really, really, really important. Nothing in the material world in and of itself is useful. It's only useful if it is a tool as a means to an end. If you want more into that, see the whole Medrash Rabbah on Keheles, on Ecclesiastes. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. It's really important. Everything that God has made physically is a fantastic thing as a tool to get something done for the body and soul to use it together. And we can't get close to God without it. Buddhists and Jains who would divest themselves of physicality, because that's the only way to spirituality, have made a terrible error. What they do is they see spirituality as something separate, physicality is something separate, and the physicality is a barrier to spirituality. The only thing they can do is peel away physicality to hope for something spiritual. We know that's intrinsically wrong. The only path to spirituality is by utilizing physicality. Physicality is merely a tool that was given to us to interface with spirituality. Think about any mitzvah, any commandment God gives us out of 613. They've all got a physical component. You want to take challah from dough, light candles on Shabbos, drink wine on Purim, abstain from food on Yom Kippur, dwell in a booth, eat flatbreads, wave a wand made of special species. You got to have something physical to do it with. You want to put on tefillin. You want to ablute yourself in a ritualarium, toivel in a mikveh. You got to have physical things. There is no path to God without physicality. It's the utilization of physicality which is the path to God. The Torah is merely a manual written by the author of creation as to how to best use the physical world around you to fulfill the path to God the best that you can in your given circumstances and situation. If you're a boy, if you're a girl, if you're a Cohen, if you're a Levi, if you're Yisrael, if you live in Eretz Yisrael, if you live in England, wherever you are, that's the path. The halacha hailech, the way to go, is to use physicality in that way. This bell in and of itself is not holy. The pen of Rashi was not holy in and of itself. But if you utilize it in the best way you can to get to something of worth, then it becomes an extremely important tool in your life. If you aspire to physical goods purely to aspire to physical goods, it's going to hamper you because you're not using them for anything. The highest utilization of all physicality as an end in and of itself is art. Art must be intrinsically useless for anything else but its artistic concept. Anything which is like a Lamborghini or a beautiful car which is beautifully artistic, let's say, that's artistic and it has artistic merit, maybe, beautiful design, but it's not art because it's functional. A beautiful cigarette lighter, a beautiful pen, or a wonderful kitchen sideboard, whatever it is, it could be artistically put together by the greatest artist living in the world, but it has a function to be a pen, to be a kitchen sideboard, whatever it is. Something which is true art must have no function but art. That's physicality only for physicality. And in and of itself, it is intrinsically empty, which is why art critics and people who love art are always looking for meaning surrounding it. Because intrinsically, it is actually utterly meaningless. All it can do is allude to other meanings somewhere else in life, at best. God is saying, enjoy physicality. Have the physicality. I made it for you. Use it right. Use this object at this time in that way, but you can't use that object at another time another way. Food being eaten for Shabbos is fantastic. Food being eaten on the Day of Atonement, if you're not ill and don't need it for medical conditions, is horrendous. So the same food could do great things for you in a certain way and terrible things for you in another way, depending on the time and circumstance. It's not intrinsically good or bad. It's how it's used in that time. The Torah, which just means teaching or the way or the law, Torah means literally the law of something, is how to best utilize physicality in that way at that time. This is an incredibly important idea. You want to cling to God? You want to have a real spiritual experience? Judaism would say, utilize physicality in the best way possible. That's how you'll best do it. Amazing. Don't divest yourself of physicality. Divest yourself of a desire only to be physical, but utilize physicality in your pursuit. It's an extremely important point. Even though the soul is intrinsically pure and lofty, as soon as it associates itself with the body and becomes entangled with the material world, it becomes divorced from its true nature and is influenced towards something that is its precise opposite, a desire for physicality. The soul becomes confused when it enters the world, looking for things like the latest iPhone or the latest gadget. That's not what the soul really wants. As long as the soul remains associated with the body, it's imprisoned by a restraining power. As we discussed last time, it's got to be turned down and put in the clay pot. Otherwise, Bechira won't happen. And unless it, the soul, can overcome this power, it cannot act freely. Now listen to this really important line, and with this we'll end. God decreed that the combination of body and soul must ultimately be permanent. Why? There's no full reward without partial physical, partial spiritual reward, because everything you ever did was partially physical, partially spiritual, in different degrees, which means the reward will be in different degrees. Even though the two, body and soul, separate at death, which unfortunately is an outcome of Adam Arishan's first choice. This is only a temporary state. It must be, because if it was permanent, God wouldn't be giving a perfect giving. And that means he'd be failing. So this temporary state exists only until the resurrection. After the resurrection, body and soul must coexist forever. Has to. Otherwise, the reward that God will be giving will be flawed, imperfect, incomplete. He can't do that. He can't fail. You've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. The most important thing we've understood here is the utilization of physicality for a higher purpose. Physicality in and of itself cannot be an end that will ever have something lasting productivity. Can't have it. Which is why Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, Hevel Havolim, physicality in and of itself is vanity of vanities, but it's fantastic if you use it correctly. In and of itself, nothing of any worth. For a spiritual pursuit like matzahs, Shabbos, tzedakah, fantastic. Fantastic. That it becomes eternally important and you'll get rewarded in physical coins, as it were, in Olam Haba too. But just to chase the coin so that you can amass coins, waste of time. Important rules for life. Looking forward to seeing you next time. I really appreciate you being here.